Hi everyone, what's up? So in this video, I'm going to discuss in detail what are the different SQL date functions. I've given some examples to explain each of these date functions using a sample dataset. Link to this dataset as well as the notebook that I'm going to show you is in the description. Once you've watched this video, feel free to check out my other videos. I have recently published a couple of videos covering SQL Window Functions, so the link to those are in the I button as well as in the description. And finally, if you are new to this channel, then hit the subscribe button as it will help my channel grow. And if you found this video useful, then feel free to share it with your friends and like the video. Now let's get started. So I have divided the whole video into two sections. The first section consists of the date functions in SQL, while the second section has the timestamp functions. Now by default, the date format which you get when you are ingesting from any source is this one. That is YYYYMMDD. And in order to explain each of the function, I have used this particular dataset. It is called sales data. Link to this dataset is in the description, so feel free to use it for your practice purpose. So as you can see, this is the data we are going to use, and mainly this column, that is the order date column, which we are going to use for our examples. Now the first function is current date. What current date does is it returns the current date as a date column. So here you can see I've written this query, select star comma current date as today from sales date. So as you can see, we have the sales data rows here, and this today column has been generated at the end. Now this today column has the value 2024-09-22. Basically when I ran this query, the day at that time was this one, that is 2024-09-22. One more thing to consider here is what data type this particular function returns. So if I open this drop down, so as you can see, this today column's data type is date. So current date returns as a date type column. Moving on, let's check out the other functions. So first let's see how you can format date. So date format function is used to convert a date or a timestamp or string to a value of string in a format specified. So in the syntax, we have to give a column or a particular date value along with the output format, the format that you expect. So here is the final query, select order date, date format. Then I've used the column order date here as an input, and I've specified the output format like this, which is DD So as you can see in the result, this is my order date column, and every particular date value has been changed. This is the new format, basically the format which I specified here. So DD has come first, then and then the year. Similarly, you can change the format to anything else like this one. Here I've changed it to MMYYY. And in the result, as you can see, this 2018-01-23 has now become 01-2018. So similar kind of things you can do. Now there is one more application of date format. So up till now, we have seen that date format can use the column value, but you can also introduce functions like now or current date inside the input parameter of date format. So now returns the current date. Basically it returns the current timestamp, and you can change the format of this timestamp into something like this. Like I've changed it to DD, YYY and So here is my final result. As you can see, this order date value, this is the order date formatted, which we have been seen up till now. And this now, whatever it was the outcome of this now method, the format of that value has been changed to this, which is 2024-09. Now, along with the format, one thing also we have to notice is what was our input data type and what is our output data type. So our input data type can be in date, timestamp or string, but our output data type, which will be returned after the formatting has been done, that will be string type. So this thing is something we have to consider for each of the date functions which we are going to learn. So the next function is toDate. toDate converts string type date column into date type, and we have to use this particular syntax when date inside this column is in default date format, which is YYYMMDD or YYYYMMDDHHMMSS. Basically your timestamp or your date value which is inside this column should be in the default format. Now in case it is not in the default format, then you can use the second one. Here you have to specify the input column along with the format that the input column's value is in. So let's understand this more clearly using some examples. In the first example, I've used current timestamp. Now current timestamp returns you the current timestamp value in the default format. Now I'm applying toDate to this current timestamp value, and as you can see, toDate has converted this particular timestamp value into a date type of column, and the output is also in date data type. So this 2024 09 22, this particular date part has been extracted and placed here. Now, as I was saying, if your format of this input column is not in the default format, then you have to specify it in the second parameter. As you can see here in this date value, it is 22 09 2024. So this 22 is specifies the number of days, 09 specifies which month it is, and 2024 is our year. So I specified the format of my input column here, and as you can see, it has converted it into the default date format. Now, in case I don't specify correct format of this particular column, and this column is also not in the default format, then toDate will return me null. So this 22 09 2024, first of all, it is not in the default format, and in the second parameter also, I have not given the correct format. Because why is that? Because 22, there is no 22nd month in a year, right? So technically, this is an invalid format which I am giving the toDate function, and as we expected, null is returned. Moving on, you can also add any timestamp value, and you may or may not add format depending on what format you have given here. This should be in the default format even for timestamp for toDate to work. In case it is not in the default format, mention the correct format here. Moving on, let's compare date format and toDate. So here, what I've done is I have selected order date, and I've applied date format on order date and converted it into this particular format, which is DD YYYY. I'm calling it date format result. Same thing I'm doing with toDate as well, and I'm calling it toDate result. Let's check out the final data. So let's consider just this record. So 2019 06 and 17. Now our date format result worked fine. It converted this particular value into this one, which is 17 06 2019. But if you notice, toDate result has given us the same value as it was in the order date. Now you might be thinking we have given a wrong format in the second parameter. So why is this not null? The reason is the order date's actual value is in the default format. Basically, this 2019 06 17 is already in the default date format. So toDate doesn't have to check and consider this format at all. In case this was not in default format, then the toDate function will check what format is you have specified in the second parameter. But as I said, as I'm repeating myself again, as it is in the default format, so it just converts it into the default date value. Moving on, as you can see in the next example, what I've done is I've written a subquery. I've used select order date, then date format, and I'm converting the order date into this particular format. Finally, on top of this query, I've written another query, which is select order date. I've selected this date format result, which I created in the inner query, and I'm applying toDate to this date format result. And this time, see, I've specified what this input date values format should be, which is DDMMYYYY. This is something which I created here. Now, if you notice, I've got the result which I expected. First, date format converts this 2019 1031 to this DDMMYYYY format, and further, toDate again converts this into the default date format. So here is the difference between the date format and toDate function. Date format changes the format of a date column, example from YYYYMMDD to a different format. Now toDate converts a string into a date type by specifying the format in the input date. I hope you are clear on the difference of this date format and toDate and how each of these functions work. So next we'll see how to do date addition and subtraction. There is date add function which adds days to a date column, date sub function subtracts days from a date column, and date diff which returns the number of days between start and end date. So here I've explained this using this example. Select order date, and then what I'm doing is I'm adding one day to order date. I'm doing this using the date add function. Using the date sub function, I'm subtracting one day from the order date. And finally, I'm finding out the number of days between current date and order date. here is the final result. As you can see, I added one day to this particular date, so it returned me 2018 01/24. I subtracted one day from this date, so it returned me 2018 01/22. And finally, in this particular row, this particular column, that is date diff with current, it returns me the number of days between current date and order date, which is 2434. Moving on, we can also add a particular number of month to a date. So we can do that using add months. What it does is it returns the date that is num months after start date. So if you add like 2 months to a particular date, then it will return you a date which is 2 months after that particular date. Here is the example. What I'm doing, I'm adding 1 month to this order date column. And if you want to subtract a month, then all you have to do is, in the second parameter, you have to include any negative integer. In this example, I've included -1. So in the result, as you can see, add 1 month returns me value which is 1 month from this particular order date. That is, I added 1 month to this order date. So here 2018 01/23 becomes 2018 02/23. And similarly, I subtracted 1 month from this date, so it returned me 2017 12/23. Because it was a January month, so it returned me previous year's date. Similarly, we can also find the number of months between two dates. So months between returns the number of months between dates which are start and end. A whole number is returned if both inputs have same day of month or both are the last day of their respective months. Otherwise, the difference is calculated assuming 31 days per month. You can also add another parameter to this particular function, which is roundoff. Now, roundoff is a Boolean function. You can either set it to true or false. So if roundoff is set to true, the result is rounded off to 8 digits. And if it is set to false, then it is not rounded to 8 digits. By default, in months between, roundoff is set to true. Let's check that out. So in this example, I've selected order date, then months between, I'm doing order date and current date. I'm finding out the months between them. Calling this column as months between current. And in the fifth particular line, what I've done is I am finding out the months between the order date and current date, and I've given the third parameter, that is the roundoff parameter, equal to false. What it will do, it will not round off the difference value between the these two dates. So here is the result. So the number of months between order date and the current date is returned here, and as you can see, by default the roundoff is true. So there are 8 digits after this decimal point. That is, it is rounded off to 8 decimal point. Now, because I set it to false for this particular column, here you can see the number of digits after the decimal point is way more than 8. Basically, it is not rounded off. And the reason it is a negative, because the current date is ahead of the particular order date, that is 2018. So that's why you get a negative integer here. So I hope you understand all the ways we can add and subtract days, and also how we can add and subtract months to a particular date. So next is how we can extract certain elements from a date. So you can take out year, quarter, month using these 3 functions. So year extracts the year as integer from a given date, timestamp or string. Quarter extracts the quarter as an integer from a given date, timestamp or string. And month extracts the month as an integer from a given date, timestamp or string. So the syntax is very straightforward. You just have to place the date column inside these functions, and it will return you the following integer values. Similarly, you can also find out the day of the week, day of the month, day of the year, and week of the year. Let's go through them one by one. So day of the week extracts the day of the week as an integer from a given date, timestamp or string. Ranges from 1 for Sunday through 7 for Saturday. So basically it will return you any number between 1 to 7, and as I said, 1 is for Sunday, 7 is for Saturday. Then day of the month extracts the day of the month as an integer for a given date, timestamp or string. So whatever the name means, that particular thing will be returned. Day of the year will return the year of that particular date. And week of the year extracts the week number as an integer from a given date or timestamp or string. A week is considered to start on Monday, and week 1 is the first week with more than 3 days as defined by ISO 8601. So let's check that out in an example. As you can see, I have order date, then I've used the day of the week, day of the month, day of the year, and day of and week of the year. So what they will do is what the name defines. So this day of the week will give you whatever whatever day is present in this particular week. Day of the month defines whichever day is there in this month. So you can see 23 is there, so that is the particular day of the month. Then day of the year also gives you the particular day of this in this year. So because it is January month, so it is first month of the year, so it will return it 23. And then again week of the year, so because it is the first month, now if I calculate, so 1 to 7 will be first week, 7 to 14, 7 to 15 will be the second week, and so on. We get 4 as the week of the year. I hope you understand what and how to use these functions, how and what they will return as an output. The next set of functions are next day and last day. Next day returns the first date which is later than the value of the date column that is on the specified day of the week. For example, next day 2015-07-27, so this is our input date value, and the day of the week, that is the second parameter, I'm giving as Sunday. So next day should return the first Sunday after this date. So technically this is 2015-08-02, and 02, this particular day is the first Sunday after this date. Coming to last day returns the last day of the month which the given date belongs to. For example, if the input column has value 2015-07-27, now in the month of July, that is 07 month, the last day is 31st. So the output will be 2015-07-31. Let's take a look at an example here. So I have selected order date, and on this order date, I am applying next day, and the day of the week parameter, I'm giving it Monday. So this will calculate and find out what is the next Monday, like which date belongs to the next Monday. Similarly, I'm doing the same thing with last day. I'm applying last day on the order date column, and I'm calling it last day of the month. So let's take a look at the result. Here is my input, that is 2018-01-23. Now the next Monday from this date is this particular date, that is 2018-01-29. Similarly, because this is the month of January and 31st is the last day of January, so the last day of month column has value 2018-01-31. So next is date truncate. Now there are two functions which we can use to truncate a date. First one is trunc. So trunc function returns date truncated to the unit specified by the format. Now there are two types of format you can give. First format you can give is for year, and the second one you can give is for month. So let's take an example. Let's say I have this timestamp 2018-11-19-12-01-19. So I want to truncate this timestamp to the year. Now when I run this command, what will happen? It will give me the date when this particular year started. So I have 2018-11-19. Now the first date of this year is 2018-01-01. So this is my answer. Now if I had given month here in the format, then it would have returned me the date when this month started, that is the 11th month. So your answer would have been 2018-11-01. Now in case you want to truncate a date using day, seconds, month, hour, week or quarter, then you have to use date trunc. The functionality is similar between date trunc and trunc. Only the syntax is a bit different. So in date trunc, you have to first specify the format, and then you have to give the input date or timestamp value. So let's take another example. So here I have the same timestamp 2018-11-19 and some time value. Now if I truncate this timestamp using year, then what will it return me? That is the first timestamp of this particular year, that is 2018. Remember, in trunc we get a date, but in date trunc we get the timestamp value. So the answer here we would get is 2018-01-01 and 000000. So this is the first hour of this time. So first timestamp of this particular year, that is 2018. Let's try to understand this better with an example. So I have this sample timestamp value. I'm calling it sample time. So one by one I have applied trunc and date trunc function. So first I've applied trunc and I'm truncating this timestamp using year. So what it will return me? The first date of this year 2024, that is 2024-01-01. Basically when this year started. And now if I truncate this timestamp using that is month, so it will return me the date when this month started or the first date of this 04 month. So 2024-04-01 is the answer. Now let's apply date trunc. Now in the same timestamp, I will truncate this date by year using the date trunc function. So it returns me the first timestamp of this year, that is 2024-01-01, and all the time value along with the date. Similarly, if I now truncate this timestamp with day and I'm using date trunc, so it will give me the particular date, particular timestamp when this 22 date started. So the answer is 2024-04-22. And if I truncate this timestamp with R, then it will return me the timestamp when this R, that is 03, that is 3 AM started. So you can see this is my answer. If I truncate this timestamp using minute, so it will return me the timestamp when this minute started, that is 0324 is the timestamp where the minute started. So it returned me this. And finally, if I give second, then it will return me the timestamp when the second started. Now there is no millisecond after 44, so it returns me the same value. But if you notice here, this 0.000, if there would have been a value in my input, then those value would have been neglected and it would return me the timestamp when this second, that is 44th second started. So I hope you understand what trunc and date trunc is and what is the major difference between these two functions. Coming to the next section of this video, which is timestamp functions. Now, just like date function, timestamp functions also come with the default format. So the default timestamp format is YY, DD, and SS. So in order to get the current timestamp value, you have to use this current_timestamp function. The brackets at the end is optional. You can apply it or you may not apply it. It will return you this particular value. Now, when I run this command, then this was the current timestamp. So that is what I got. Now, just like date function, you also have timestamp formatting. Now, for timestamp formatting, we use toTimestamp. So toTimestamp also converts a string or a date value in a column into a timestamp value. And the return type, let's see that. So return type is also a timestamp type. Let's try to understand the toTimestamp and how this works with an example. So here I've selected current date. And what I'm doing is first I'm applying toTimestamp to this current date. Now current date is already in the default timestamp format. So even if you apply, even if you write the format here and you or you don't write here, it won't make any difference. So toTimestamp, just like toDate, it expects you to give the input value in a default format. Otherwise it will give me null. So we will also go through that particular case as well. Now, when I run this command, you can see it converted the current date into the timestamp format. Similarly, if I take this particular example, so here you can see the format of this input date value is DD, then then YY. Now, in order to make toTimestamp understand that this is in a different format, I have to specify that correct format in the second parameter. So when I run this command, it converts this particular date value into timestamp, and that too in the default timestamp format. As you can see, 2023, 12, 24 and the time component. So this is the default format, which is YY, DD, and SS. Now just let's come to that null particular scenario where I have given the input date value, but this is not in the default timestamp or default date format. So this format is DD, YY. Now for these kind of cases, I have to give I have to specify what format this input date is in, because toTimestamp doesn't know and it expects us to give the default format. So that's why toTimestamp will return null for this particular case. Now this is the final example I'll give you for toTimestamp. So here you can see I have not mentioned the date, not mentioned the day. All I've given is 12/2023 and I've informed toTimestamp that the format is and YY. So it will automatically create a new timestamp value starting with the day equal to 01. As you can see, this is my result. Moving on, similar to date, we can also scrap out the time elements of from a timestamp value. So we have hour, minute, and seconds. R extracts the hours as an integer from a given date, timestamp, or string. Minute will extract the minutes as an integer from given date, timestamp, or string. And second will extract seconds as an integer from a given date, timestamp, or string. So here I've given the example. I am selecting the current timestamp and I'm applying all these three functions to this current timestamp value. So as you can see, R has scrapped out the number 18, minute has scrapped out the number 43, and second has scrapped out number 33. So the next function is Unix timestamp. Now what is Unix time? It is a way to represent time and date as number of seconds that have passed since Unix epoch. So what is Unix epoch? It is January 1, 1970, and that too midnight. So there are two functions which give us this Unix time value. First one is Unix timestamp, and here we have to give the input date column or the timestamp column, but the format should be in the default timestamp format or the default date format. So this function will calculate the number of seconds since this date till the particular date which you have provided in the input. Now in case your column has a date value or a timestamp value which is not in the default format, so you can use the toUnix timestamp function. Here you have to specify the input column. Along with that, you have to specify what is the format or what is the date or the timestamp format of this input column's value. So here is the example. Select order date and I'm applying Unix timestamp on this order date. So as you can see, it returned me the number of seconds and the data type which it returned me in is long. Same thing I'm doing here. So I have written this timestamp value, applying toUnix timestamp, and I've specified the format of this particular timestamp value. Now it also returns me the number of seconds and the data type that it returns me is long. So previously we saw how to generate the Unix time value. Now if you want to convert the Unix time value back to a regular timestamp value, then you have to use the from Unix time function. So what does this function do? It converts the number of seconds from Unix epoch to a string representing the timestamp of that moment in the current system time zone in the default timestamp format. And if you want to get the timestamp into a different format, then you have to specify that output format here in the second parameter. Let's try to understand this using an example. So I have this sample timestamp value. Now what I'll do is I'll first convert it into a Unix time. So I'll use the toUnix timestamp function and it generated this value. Now I will use this Unix time and convert it back to a regular timestamp value. So in the first line, in the first Unix from Unix time, this function, I have not given any output format. So it will generate me the timestamp value in the default format. So as you can see, this is the output output timestamp value in the default format, which is equal to the sample timestamp. Now what I'll do is in the from Unix time, I will mention the Unix time and I will mention the output format as well. So as you can see, this is DDMMYYYY, and I've placed the minutes also before and then the hour and then the seconds. So in the output, as you can see, it has converted the timestamp into this format which I specified. So I hope you understood from Unix time, and that's it I had to cover about all the SQL date functions. So that's it for this video. If you found it useful, then please share it with your friends and like the video. In the coming few weeks, I have planned many such videos on PySpark and SQL interview questions. So stay tuned for them, and if you have not subscribed, then please press the subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.